first of all, introduction, the motivation. So basically, really, we are under the huge pressure to decarbonize the maritime industry. So, as probably you all know, that the global shipping industry emit about around 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions due to human activities, and on the other side, so these 2% emissions seems not too much. But on the other side, if we try to focus on the NOx emissions and SOx emissions, basically we can see 15% of the global NOx emissions actually coming from ships, and 49% of SOx emissions actually comes from ships. So basically, on one hand, we have a lot of CO2 emissions, and also, but on the other side, because we heavily rely on internal combustion engines such as diesel engines, so basically we are emitting a few times higher in terms of NOx emissions and SOx emissions. On the other side, by 2050, we have to reduce the global shipping emissions quite significantly, at least in terms greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. On the right side, we can see if we continue business as usual, basically we are going to see that if that would be the scenario, basically we end up with many times higher CO2 emissions or greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. But on the other side, if we do take some measures, for example, using operational measures or design and technical measures, and or something related to the propulsion system, and we limit the emissions from the powertrain and from the propulsion system, and basically these are the potential region we can achieve. So today we are going to focus a bit more on the coastal shipping side. By coastal shipping, basically, we try to focus on ships. These have a smaller size. The main reason behind is, first of all, we have roughly around 25% emissions actually emitted by the coastal ships. And these coastal ships typically they use much smaller four-stroke, medium speed or high-speed diesel engines. And so on one hand, they may be less efficient compared to the large two-stroke diesel engines, which might be widely used on large container ships or tankers crossing the oceans. On the other side, they have much wider operating profiles compared to the large ships crossing the oceans. The wide operating profile basically means the loading condition for the diesel engines are not that great. So basically, the engines may have to operate quite frequently in unfavorable loading conditions, which may lead to worse emission performance and fuel efficiency. But on the other side, the good thing from the focusing of coastal shipping is these ships typically have much smaller power requirements. Let's say if we are trying to decarbonize the coastal shipping, and then these smaller power requirements basically it means less risky to start with. On the other side, because the smaller power requirements, it's much easier to adapt the other technology. For example, fuel cell and batteries have been widely applied for other sectors, for example, automotive and aviation sectors. Right. So that'll be the focus. The coastal shipping, basically, we try to use fuel cells and batteries to in a hybrid system and try to also to incorporate the grid power to power the ships. So what do we have on the right side, on the lower right side of the slide? Basically, we can see we have the fuel cells, and fuel cells is powered by alternative fuels. So in our case, we'll be talking about hydrogen fuel cells, and the fuel cells will be proton exchange memory fuel cells. And we have the batteries. Batteries is a form of energy storage system. So it can be either in a plug-in or non-plug-in system. Today, we are going to focus on the plug-in case. Basically, it means we will have access to the grid power. So grid power will be able to charge the batteries when the vessel is at the port. So by the end, so we have a hybrid propulsion system, and which is comprising fuel cells and batteries to power the loads. So the loads includes the auxiliary and propulsion loads. So that's a generic system. The focus, because we have multiple power sources here, the batteries, the fuel cells, and also the grid power. So the focus is really how do we use deep reinforced learning to do the planning for the hybrid powertrain and to maximize the fuel efficiency and to minimize the grid degradation coming from the fuel cells and batteries. So that's something we are going to talk about later. Right. So if we take a quick look at the alternative propulsion systems. So on the upper side, on this side, basically we can see the energy storage systems. So if we try to focus on the battery capacity, starting from 2012 all the way to 2017, so basically we can have seen there has been a really clear growth in terms of the battery capacity because battery technologies has been matured and advanced due to the innovations coming from the automotive sector. But on the other side, if we try to focus on the lower side of the this chart, basically for the fuel cells, so what we can see fuel cells are pretty much still constrained by many things, and their technology and readiness level has to be advanced. And the fuel supply system and then supply chain, for example, for hydrogen or any other types of alternative fuels, needs to be ramped up to be up to speed. So there's quite a lot of work to do, but on the other side, challenges means opportunities. So basically, ideally, we would like to combine the strengths we are getting from the batteries and then using the fuel cells as a sort of range extender to compensate the energy density limitation we are having from the batteries. So that's one of the ideas why we are using fuel cell and battery hybrids.